Hi, today we're going to be looking at converting between miles and kilometres. To convert between miles and kilometres, we firstly need to know how many kilometres there are in 1 mile. We have 1.6 kilometres in every mile. Now this can be written as a ratio, and a ratio just tells us how much of one thing there is compared to another. It's normally written like this, and all it means is we have 1.6 kilometres in every 1 mile. But what if we wanted to find out how many kilometres there were in, for example, 2 miles? Well, we'll put a 2 underneath, and the important thing to remember about ratios is that whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. In this case, we are multiplying by 2, so we must multiply the right hand side by 2 as well. 1.6 multiplied by 2 gives us 3.2. If you're struggling to multiply by a decimal, you can firstly multiply 1.6 by 10 to give you 16, and then you can count up in 16s. So 16, 32, 48, 64, 80, etc. Just remember once you've finished to put your decimal points back in, because you need to divide them all by 10. You multiplied 1.6 by 10 to get 16, so then you need to divide them all by 10 once you've finished. A handy conversion to know is 5 miles, which is 8 kilometres, because they're both whole numbers. So you can see that 5 16s were 80, so if you divide that 80 by 10, you get 8. So 5 miles, mi, is equal to 8 kilometres, and we normally use a km to abbreviate that. Let's take a look at some example questions then. Question number 1 says, how many kilometres are there in 4 miles? I've put the conversions up here, so 1 mile is 1.6, so 5 miles is 8 kilometres. So kilometres in 4 miles, if 1 mile is 1.6 kilometres, then 4 miles, we need to firstly multiply the 1 by 4, and remember we do the same to both sides, so we need to do 1.6 multiplied by 4. You can do 16 multiplied by 4 if it's easier. You can multiply those, 24, carry the 2, 1 multiplied by 4 is 4, plus the 2, 64, and remember you need to put the decimal point back in, so 6.4 kilometres is your answer to the first one. For question number 2, we are asked to find how many miles there are in 16 kilometres. This is a little bit different because we are going the other way this time, so we're converting from kilometres to miles. Now for this one, the second conversion that I put on the right hand side will be helpful, which says 5 miles is equal to 8 kilometres. Well, hopefully you should be able to see that 8 is half of 16, so if 8 kilometres is 5 miles, 16 kilometres, we've just doubled the 8, which means we double the 5, so that will be 10 miles. The final question is a worded problem. John says 64 kilometres is equivalent to 35 miles. Is he correct? Explain your answer. The first thing to note is this equivalent bit here. Equivalent means same. So John's saying that 64 kilometres is equal to, it's the same as 35 miles. Now to figure this question out, we're going to use this up here. 5 miles is equivalent to 8 kilometres, and a general rule when you're converting particularly bigger numbers in kilometres and miles is, if we take the example of kilometres, so kilometres to miles, we divide our value in kilometres by 8 and we multiply that answer by 5. Similarly, if you convert miles to kilometres, you divide your number of miles by 5 and multiply by 8. So in practice it looks like this: 64 kilometres we firstly divide by 8, which, if you know your square numbers, you should be able to figure out is 8, because 8 multiplied by 8 is 64. And for the second part, we multiply by 5. So 8 times 5, that will give us 40. Now that is not equivalent to 35. That's not the same as. Equals with a line through it just means not equal to, so it's not the same as 35. So we can say that John is incorrect, because originally he said 64 kilometres is equivalent to 35 miles, but we now know that 64 kilometres is equivalent to 40 miles. So John is incorrect. Hopefully that was okay. Let's try a couple more questions. Here's 2 questions for you to have a go at. Pause the video now and have a go, and then come back and play it when you're ready. Okay, question number 1 says, the distance between Leeds and London is 200 miles. What is the distance between Leeds and London in kilometres? Use the fact that 8 kilometres equals 5 miles. Okay, so if you remember, I said when we convert from miles to kilometres, especially with bigger numbers, we firstly divide our value in miles by 5 and then multiply it by 8. Let's do that here and see what we get. 200 miles divided by 5 gives us an answer of 40. And if you struggle to do that in your head, I would advise taking off a 0 from the 200 and doing 20 divided by 5, which is 4, and then adding your 0 back on, because you need to multiply it by 10 again. So 40 is our answer to that, and then we need to multiply it by 8. So multiply that by 8 gives us 320. Again, you can take the 0 off and do 8 multiplied by 4 and then add it back on to give 320 kilometres. So we can go ahead and pop that in the box. The second question says the distance between Calais and Paris is 288 kilometres. What's the distance between Calais and Paris in miles? To convert from kilometres to miles, like I said before, we firstly need to divide our value in kilometres by 8 and then multiply that answer by 5. In this case, we have 288 kilometres, which we need to firstly divide by 8. 2 divided by 8 does not give a whole number answer, so we'll put a 0 there and carry the 2. 8 into 28, there are 3, because 8 multiplied by 3 is 24, so we have a remainder of 4 there. And 8 into 48, there are 6. So 8 multiplied by 36 gives us 288, so we've done the division. Now we need to multiply this answer of 36 by 5. So 36 multiplied by 5, 6 multiplied by 5 gives us 30, so carry the 3, 3 multiplied by 5 is 15, add the 3 is 18, which gives us an answer of 180 miles. So we'll pop that in the box. Hopefully they were alright. Let's look at some questions with decimals in now, which are a little bit trickier. The first question asks us, how many kilometres are there in 12.9 miles? Now this is trickier than the others because we've got a decimal here, 12.9. We already know that in 1 mile there are 1.6 kilometres. So in 12.9 miles, we've multiplied the 1 by 12.9. It's essentially asking us for 1.6 multiplied by 12.9. Okay, that's the sum that we need to do. Now to work this out, I'm going to round 12.9 to the nearest whole number, which is 13, to make it a bit easier for myself. So I'm doing 1.6, I'm going to make it 16, just to take the decimal out, and I'm going to multiply that by 13. So 3 multiplied by 6 is 18, carry the 1. 3 multiplied by 1 is 3, add that 1 is 4. 0 underneath, moving into the tens column. 1 multiplied by 6 is 6, 1 multiplied by 1 is just 1, and then adding them together we get 8, 6 and 4 is 10, and then 208, and then if we divide that by 10 again, put the decimal point back in, we get 20.8. So that should be our answer, shouldn't it? 20.8. Well, no, it isn't, because we multiplied by 13, we actually need to multiply, if you remember, by 12.9. So how are we going to do that? Well, we need to find a tenth of 1.6. Okay, essentially what that is 13 minus 0.1, which is equal to 12.9. So this is the bit that we need here. This is a tenth, okay, 0.1. We have this bit, that's fine. We need this part of the question, so we can subtract it from our answer over here of 20.8 and find what 12.9 miles are in kilometres. So 0.1, well, 1.6 multiplied by 0.1, that's exactly the same as 1.6 divided by 10. Okay, it's a tenth. So if we move the decimal point to the left, we find that it's 0.16. Okay, so if we take our answer from before, 20.8, so this was 13 multiplied by 1.6, 20.8, and we subtract the tenth, 0.1, that was 0.16, so a tenth of 1.6. We are left with 20.64, and that would be kilometres. Okay, so that was quite a tricky question. Well done if you got that. Question 2 says, how many miles are there in 7.2 kilometres? If you remember, to go from kilometres to miles, we need to divide our number of kilometres by 8 and multiply our answer by 5. So 7.2 divided by 8. I know 72 divided by 8 is 9, so 7.2 divided by 8 will be 0.9. We then have to multiply our answer by 5, so 0.9 multiplied by 5. I know that 9 times 5 is 45, so 0.9 multiplied by 5, we need to divide our answer by 10 to give us 4.5. So 7.2 kilometres is 4.5 miles. The final question says, Isla has planned her run on the map below. How far is this run in kilometres? The first thing to do is to add up all the values. So 4.5 plus 2.5 plus 2 plus 0.5 is 9.5 miles. To put this into kilometres, we are going to split this number up into units and tenths. So essentially it will be 9 multiplied by 1.6 plus 0.5 multiplied by 1.6. okay, because we have the 9 and the 0.5, which is the 9.5 from over here. So we've just split it up. 9 multiplied by 1.6, I'm going to say it's 16 multiplied by 9, just to make it a bit easier, and then I can divide my answer by 10 at the end. So 6 multiplied by 9 is 54, and 1 multiplied by 9 is 9, plus 5 is 14, so I get 144 there. If I put my decimal point back in, I get 14.4, and then 0.5 multiplied by 1.6, that's the same as saying a half of 1.6, or a half of 16 if you find that easier, which is 8. So half of 1.6 would be 0.8. Okay. Now, like with before, all we have to do is add our answers together. So 14.4 plus 0.8 gives us an answer of 15.2 kilometres. Hopefully they were all okay.